Welcome back to another episode of the Sleepwalker Chronicles. Today's story is based around a true crime case from 1912 in Villisca, Iowa, that to today remains unsolved. No suspects, only theories, myths, and legends. With a family that never woke up and a morning that had a deafening silence. Let's get into it. On the morning of June 10, 1912, a neighbor in Villisca, Iowa, noticed that the Moore family had not started their chores. In a small town, that mattered. The animals had not been tended to. The house was too still. The day had begun, but something inside the Moore home had not followed it. By the time the front door was opened, Villisca had already crossed into a story it would never escape. The night before, the town had been full of ordinary sounds. Church doors opening, children speaking their lines, parents gathering their coats, footsteps returning home under the dark Midwestern sky. Josiah and Sarah Moore were very well known in Villisca. Josiah worked in the hardware business and was connected throughout the community. Sarah was active in church life. Their children, Herman, Catherine, Arthur, and Paul, were still young enough that the house held the daily noise of school, play, meals, and bedtime. That Sunday evening, the Moore family attended a children's program at the Presbyterian church. Two sisters, Lena and Ina Stingler, were there as well. They were friends of the Moore children, and that night they were allowed to sleep over at the Moore house. It was the kind of decision that should have disappeared into family memory. Two girls staying with friends, a walk home after church, a warm house, bedtime. Instead, it became part of one of the most infamous unsolved crimes in American history. The Moore home was not a mansion. It was a family house. Rooms were close, floors creaked. The space between beds, walls, and doorways were not large. Whoever entered that house did so in a place where silence would have mattered. Sometime after midnight, while the household slept, a killer moved through the rooms. The violence was terrible, and it took the lives of all 8 people inside: Josiah and Sarah Moore, their 4 children, and Lena and Ina Stingler. Out of respect for the victims, the details do not need to be recited more than necessary. What matters is that the attack was intimate, deliberate, and devastating. The weapon was believed to be an axe from the Moore property. The victims were attacked in their sleep. No one was ever convicted. The crime scene left investigators with details that were almost as disturbing as the killings themselves. Mirrors in the house had been covered. Cloth had been placed over faces. A lamp had reportedly been left with its chimney removed and the flame turned low, giving only a weak light. Food had been left behind. A bowl or basin of water suggested that the killer may have washed before leaving. Nothing about the scene felt rushed in the way people wanted it to feel rushed. The idea that someone could have entered a family home, killed all 8 occupants, moved through the rooms effortlessly, and leave into the dark without being caught gave the case a nightmare quality from the beginning. Villisca was not a large city where strangers disappeared into crowds. It was a town where people recognized footsteps. That made the silence much, much worse. When the bodies were found, the house did not remain protected in the way a modern crime scene would. Early 20th century investigation did not have the forensic standards that later generations would expect. People entered, evidence was handled, curiosity and horror moved faster than preservation. The investigation still produced clues though, theories, and suspects, but never an answer strong enough to hold. Some wondered whether the killer had hidden inside the house before the family returned from church. Others looked outside the house, towards business rivalries, traveling strangers, or men whose names would be carried through rumors for decades. One historical suspect was Frank Jones, a powerful local figure and former employer of Josiah Moore. The theory around him involved alleged business tension and personal resentment, but no evidence led to a conviction. Another was Reverend Lynn George Jacqueline Kelly, a traveling preacher who had been in Villisca around the time of the murders. Kelly later became the center of legal proceedings and reportedly confessed, but the confession and case against him did not end in conviction. He was acquitted. Those names remain part of the story because investigators and historians discuss them. They did not solve it. The horror of Villisca is not only that 8 people were murdered, it is that the case created a permanent imbalance between what was known and what could be proven. The town knew the family had gone to church. It knew the children had gone to bed. It knew a neighbor noticed the morning routine was missing. It knew a killer had been inside the house long enough to leave behind strange, careful signs. But it did not know who. And without the who, every other detail becomes a doorway into fear. For the people of Villisca, the killer was not a character in a story. He was someone who has been walking the same streets, someone who had known the town's rhythms, someone who may have even stood amongst the crowd after the bodies were found, listening as neighbors gasped and whispered. That possibility haunted the investigation. As the years passed, the Villisca case gathered layers. Newspaper accounts, rumors, confessions, retractions, theories, books, tours, and ghost stories all attached themselves to this house. The building itself became a symbol, part crime scene, part historical site, and part legend. But before it was any of those things, it was a home. That fact can get lost very easily. It was a home where Sarah Moore prepared for church events. It was a home where Josiah returned after work. It was a home where 4 children slept upstairs and 2 visiting sisters expected to wake up the next morning and go back to their own families. The case deserves to be remembered not only for the mystery, but for the lives that were interrupted by it. There is a reason the detail of the morning chores stays with people. It is small, almost domestic. A neighbor noticed an absence before anyone knew that there had been a crime. The first warning was not a scream in the night or chase through the street. It was routine failing to happen. No one came outside. No one fed the animals. No one opened the house to the day. In true crime, the most frightening details are not always the most violent. Sometimes they are the quiet ones. A lamp burning low, a covered mirror, a neighbor waiting a little longer than usual before deciding something was wrong. That is where Villisca lives, in the gap between ordinary life and unimaginable violence. More than a century later, the question remains: who entered the Moore house after midnight? Who moved through those rooms without waking the town? Who left 8 people behind and stepped back into the dark? The case files offer theories. Historians offer arguments. The house offers atmosphere. But the legal answer never came. No conviction, no final confession that settled the matter. No ending that could give Villisca the comfort of certainty. Only a house, a summer night, and a morning when the chores did not begin. And in the story of Villisca, that quiet morning has never really ended. And that brings us to the end of another episode. If you enjoyed, please leave a like. If you have any suggestions, please leave a comment. And if this is the kind of stories you like hearing about, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Until next time, stay safe.